So you began basically as a painter, and
I've always been a painter. When I was a child, I drew things that children draw. My mother told me to draw courtyard scenes, magnolias, and I drew them. And I didn't have any art training in high school at all. And then when I went to college, I studied all abstract things, and so I became an abstract painter. And through the 50s, late 40s and 50s, I did very non-objective sort of Paul Klee, Miro sort of non-objective things. And just when the whole world was convinced that that's what they wanted, I realized I didn't want it, and I was doing advertising and some other things. And so in 1960, I just switched right over back to figurative work, did still lifes and landscapes, and aiming at doing figures. So for the first 5 years of the 60s, I little by little moved into figures by way of doing some landscapes and things to get my brush going on figurative expression. By the middle of the 60s, it was pretty obvious that the figures were going to take over, and they moved up closer and closer and became, I guess, what people call Baroque. Actually, it was just that I was intense about the figures, and so I would articulate them and work them and try to make them express what I was talking about, and so they got to look Baroque. I guess that's how Baroque gets to happen.
wasn't there a story about how you were painting landscapes, and there was a gentleman in the neighborhood and he kept appearing in the landscapes, and all of a sudden...
Yeah, I had a house in the country I shared with a friend, Chris, and I would paint the levee in front of the house, the levee on the river, and all of a sudden my next door neighbor, my across the street neighbor, a black man from this little country town, he came over and sat to watch me, and so I painted him into the picture, and that was the end of that. The figures took over the paintings took over the landscapes after that. That's Walter Ellerman, my good friend down there.
Oh.
So by the late 60s, my paintings almost always were dominated by figures. I realized by the end of the 60s that although the pictures were beautiful and decorative and even sumptuous sometimes, I wanted the drawing to be more precise and not so much tight, precise, but explosive and expressive. And so I took up drawing again, although I had not drawn since early days of college. When I was in college, they didn't teach drawing. They had drawing. There was a sketch class, but there was nobody in it that sketched as well as I did, so that wasn't doing me any good. I mean, I already drew better than the teachers did then. So I had to kind of invent how to do representational painting, because the painting I did in college was abstract. So I had to invent what figurative painting was going to be for me. And I pretty well had a kind of a broadside, big slabby sort of, actually kind of West Coast looking kind of painting, big buttery paint, a little like Diebenkorn, I guess, except it was like if Diebenkorn were painting Edward Hopper kind of street scenes. My street scenes, however, were always hotter and more interesting, more interested in the people than Edward Hopper would ever be, because he's so New Englandy in his crispness, and mine were always a bit gushy. I would jump into the ditches that people were digging. So I took up drawing everybody in the late 60s, and it surprised people because drawing, although it was respected, it was sort of like respected in a hushed kind of way, and people would go to museums and places elsewhere and see beautiful drawings by someone who's dead, right? And they never thought of drawing as it has turned out to be for me. That is your everyday thing, like writing notes to yourself, like writing notes to anyone. I draw some pictures more seriously and some pictures more casually, but it's a handwriting. But that way of looking at drawing, I don't think is known to people for the most part, even educated people. They don't seem to know that the drawings aren't done for style most of the time. The reason Michelangelo's drawings and Leonardo's and Raphael's and Rembrandt's and Rubens and all of those drawings seem so related one to the other. They're also truthful. They seem to be talking about things that are real more than the paintings do. The paintings frequently drift away into some sort of novelty or operatic style or something, whereas the drawings always are telling you what the people are concerned about. And my drawings always tell you more where I'm at than the paintings. Paintings frequently, because there's more money involved, paintings frequently have to go into a place or have to suit some thing, have to have a reason for getting sold, you know? And although I don't paint the pictures just because somebody told me paint such and such as a rule, I still, you know that you're putting out this sort of like creating this big opera, and it's going to have this style to it, and it's going to have this bombastic effect. And in a drawing, because it's just paper and it's just charcoal in my case, you just do it, and if you have to throw it away, you throw it away, and you don't think about that if you draw every day a lot. You just go and draw, and if it's good, maybe you'll sell it, maybe you'll put it on the wall, but it's just like writing notes to yourself anyway. Actually, it's my drawings that motivate everything. The drawings are at the middle of my career, and I go this way into painting, or I go that way into photographs. It becomes more operatic and more involved with art elements when I take a subject and bring it into painting. If on the other hand I decide that I'm fascinated by the person that I'm drawing or thinking about, I'll turn to the camera, and because it provides a sort of clinical that overwhelming talent the camera has for capturing things. Now, I'm not particularly fond of sitting and capturing every detail in people, and sometimes you'll have a model who is fascinating in a lot of ways that you don't care to sit and draw them all, the texture of skin or the hair or something like that. So I'll then use the good offices of the camera and do that. That's the way I began photographing. I had absolutely no talent, no experience with cameras at all. I didn't know how to even use Kodaks. I was never interested in photographing anything, because I drew and painted. And I wasn't even interested in the history of photography. Nothing about it interested me. And I had models that were wonderful looking to me. They came out terrific in my drawings and paintings, and people didn't believe that they existed. They thought that I had just imagined these people. So I borrowed a camera, and then I bought a cheap camera, a 2 1/4 camera, a very cheap one, and I started making some pictures with just some advice like, oh, use such and such a f-stop when you shoot inside this window or such. And I began making pictures that were almost exactly the compositions, the format, and the attitude that was in my drawings already. So I was really just telling the camera how it was supposed to behave. I was assuming it had, the camera, it seems to me, has the talent to capture any and everything. And therefore, photography is, for me anyway, an editorial art or an applied art, as opposed to the total creative art that drawing is. You don't have it if you don't make it. The camera has to just be throttled and controlled and made to do just those things that you want it to do and not do anything else, or else you wipe it out somehow.
Well, once you said the camera just had to sometimes be told, just shut up.
Well, exactly. I sometimes, well, I spend all my time moving things out of the pictures, it seems to me. I'm constantly, I'll start taking a picture and then I'll start getting more out of it, or reducing the light so as to not see so much. Lately we've cropped some pictures, but I used to not even crop them, so I spent a lot of time emptying out the frame because I wasn't going to crop them down as most photographers do. Actually, I think it's kind of nonsense about thinking that it's so pure to have used the whole frame. People used to rave on about, oh, he never crops. Well, so what? I mean, you know, I never cropped for 15 years. Now I do crop sometime when I want to. I think it's nice, though, to have the knowledge and forethought and wisdom to be able to shoot without cropping. I mean, it's nice to be able to do that. Sometimes, however, you capture something that's great and the whole composition is not that good, and so you might as well just crop it. I mean, even if you might as well crop a painting if that happens. If you have a gorgeous middle to it. Manet should have done that. If you have a gorgeous part to it, in fact he did. The Dead Toreador is that. He just cut the top off. He never could solve that. He couldn't solve anything more than this distance from the middle of the picture. I think it must have had a visual problem. So, photographs are just one way of seeing people for me, whereas paintings is another way, both of them spinning off of drawing, which to me is always the best. I love line. I love the definitive decisiveness of line, even though my lines are sometimes thick and thin, soft and smeared. But also, and maybe this is why drawings are not as popular anymore now that photography's all over the place. Drawing is an invention. There isn't that line in nature. You're creating that. There's a difference between this surface and that surface, where this one ends and that one starts, or what. But there's no such thing as line. It's a totally intellectual pursuit, and so you might have some flourishes, some chiaroscuro, some effect in your drawing that makes it look a bit like real, but it never looks real like a painting does, or real like a photograph does. It's always an abstraction. That may also explain my tremendous attraction to black and white photography, although I do some color. I'm not that much interested in color. I'm more interested in the abstraction that black and white is, because you're taking only line and form and shapes between things, and the positive shapes, the negative shapes, and making them into your picture when you do black and white photography. Whereas once the color comes in, there's all sorts of festivity and distraction and other things happening, and there's an imitation of life, an exact imitation of life is possible with color, and it's not so in black and white. That's always been very strange, that in movies as in photography, we have this interest in black and white photography, and we think it's more realistic. It's very strange. We associate it with documentation. Black and white photographs that are very documentary, black and white film seems real hardcore and documentary. And it's very funny because it's missing one of the things, color, that makes it look like life. It's like if we want to believe what the author, what the artist or the documentary director, we want to believe what they have found out, which is interesting because it's an intellectual interest we have in seeing Humphrey Bogart with his gun shooting somebody in a dark alley or what. Instead of seeing it in color, we want to see it in black and white, and it seems more real to us. Yes. I don't know, maybe everyone didn't grow up at that time, but the people who learned black and white to be a documentary kind of hardcore kind of picture, they find it very hard to see the thing in color and believe it as much. That's very strange. I don't know if it's because black and white 8x10 photographs are the way we saw criminals or events in the 40s and 50s.
Well, the movies of the 30s were black and white, and then the whole neo-realism after the war gave the European directors black and white simply to...
And I don't know why. I don't know why Anna Magnani, with tomato gravy pasta sauce is more convincing to us in black and white than it is in color.
Right.
I know I like it better, but I don't understand why it is that that is so convincing. I know that in printing photographs, you have a different kind of latitude for printing. You have, you can make more drastic changes, or I can't because I don't know much about doing color. But you can make serious poetic and orchestral changes in black and white that you're always dealing in a sort of abstraction. If you emphasize purple, it doesn't suddenly look like the flowers are a different color. You know, if you darken something, it isn't giving an added meaning somehow. You can work with the you can work with the poetry of what's already there without adding any more elements into it. I don't know, it's too hard to, that's a really hard one to resolve.
I've always thought that somehow black and white had the quality of, excuse me, moonlight. And just the way we believe the night,
Yeah.
we believe black and white film. Because there's no color in the night, yet it's all real and somehow more magical.
But isn't it funny that black and white can be used either, you say moonlight, and it made me think romantic, but it can either be used in a seductive, beautiful way, or it can be also harder than color.
Yes, right.
In my photographs, my first photographs that I took of black men, they're not much different from the ones I take today, some 18, 15 years, what is it? Oh, it's almost 20 years now I've been shooting. The first black and white pictures was so velvety. The people's flesh was so velvety, and the backgrounds were white, maybe plaster at most, or a little dirty brick edges on things. And I tried a bunch of different papers trying to decide what to do. And they were so prettified and yummy when they were warm, like portrait kind of papers. I decided then that I needed the harshness of very white paper and very black printing to make the thing less romantic and less sentimental. So instead, so we always have this sort of clinical printing of my pictures with a few lovely, yummy flourishes on it, but it's sort of a hard clinical thing. And then by the lighting now, I make it happen. But I never let it happen in the darkroom, that the picture become a soft, romantic kind of thing. I'm a camera photographer. Mapplethorpe was too. We talked about that many times. That we totally love directing, nursing the people, wringing them out, getting out of them what we wanted, although I wanted much more humanist things and he wanted more formalistic things. But my formal training is already there, and it never changes one way or the other. I've been drawing and painting forever, and my drawings was always so classical, my paintings are always so classical and fixed, that's a regular thing with me. So I assume that somewhere in my head, my predilection for shapes. And then I am inclined to orchestrate. I imagine like a movie director does. I make the people do things that they didn't expect they were going to do. On a roll of film, I always try to get into it what they think of themselves. That primarily, or let's say originally. And then I move into what I think of them, and I hope I can pull the two of them together. But anyway, I'm crazy about working with the person and pulling something out of them that is unexpected to me and or to them. And I don't like the darkroom at all. Robert didn't like the darkroom at all. He hated it. He thought it was really degrading.
He always sent someone else in there with the film.
Well, exactly. Jonathan prints mine with another photographer. They know what it is I want. The most I do is reject them, or I say I didn't want that. What I wanted to burn this a little more. And of course, I worked in the dark room when we first did them, but I really hate to do it now. I like the distance, and I think the distance Oh God, a lot of photographers will hate me for this one, but I really think the distance keeps you more an artist, because it keeps me more an idealist artist who's doing art, who's doing photographic art with art in mind, not with the technique in mind. I think you really can lower your aims when you're thinking of what happens with chemicals and what. I guess it makes a difference that I know what I want to say about people, and I know what I don't want these. I mean, I very seldom have been happily surprised by what happens in the darkroom. I mean, I don't want to be surprised. I want the picture to say what I wanted the picture to say. A friend of mine, Gene Thornton, a critic from the Times in New York, said he liked my photographs so much because I have something I want to say about anything, and I either say it with a pencil or a camera or a brush or what, but I already had the thing that I wanted to say. And he says that most photographers study photography and then they go out and they photograph photography. They don't photograph something that's in their head. They see something that, oh, that would make a good picture. I've never had that feeling. I mean, I see somebody and I say, oh, I'm going to tell such and such about him, or I'm going to tell about his plight by doing this thing, or I'm going to show how absolutely seductive and overwhelming this person can be when I pull him up close, you know, when I tickle him. But I've always had my own individual greedy, demanding things that I expect the camera to do, and if it doesn't, I just as soon hit it with a hammer. I mean, I really, I have no attraction to the machinery of it at all. I have 2 Hasselblads, two lenses and 2 bodies, and I only have that much because people have screamed at me because there was dust in my camera and it was about time I'd get it cleaned, you know. And I had 1 lens and I used it for, I guess, 8 years, a normal lens, until finally somebody convinced me that you really would do better to have a portrait lens for some of this stuff you're doing. I used to actually bend the people to make them not do fisheye sort of things. I would make people, everybody in my earlier pictures, they're sitting like this in the picture to make them look like this, which is just crazy. I mean, I knew nothing about that I could go get another lens. When I was on the verge of, it's funny that where this advice came from. There was a really wacky photographer boy who just did journalistic stuff for one of the little bitty trash papers. I said to him I wanted to photograph my models, that they were just going to be, oh, they're velvety black figures against a white wall, mostly the contours just like in my drawings, essentially silhouettes with some detail in them. And I said, what kind of camera could I get? And he said, oh, you're going to get a 2 1/4. And I said, what's that? And he says, that's what old farts like you like. And I said, oh, I said, it's real stodgy. And he said, very stodgy. And so we went and bought me a $68 Mamiya, and I used it for a couple of years with no light meter even. I'd ask people, should I do this a little darker? And some of my really good pictures, some people's real favorites were done on that camera, as a matter of fact. When I first got the Hasselblad, it was so much better than my early one. It took months for me to get the pictures right. They were so hard looking, and they had so much more depth, it seems to me, and I didn't want depth. I'm not very fascinated by deep spaces. My photographs and my paintings and drawings all sort of suggest sort of Piero della Francesca, sort of 4 feet back. There's a figure and there's a figure, and then at sort of the end there'll be architecture, or there'll be another figure coming across. But there's a shallow stage, entr'acte, sort of. They're like performances in front of a curtain. I very seldom paint very deep or draw very. I can. I mean, I've drawn deeper, and I know how to do that. But it doesn't intrigue me to pierce the surface very far. I like very often to do pictures that have the front in focus and back to 4 or 5 feet all in focus. If I can do it, I like to do that, but I don't go beyond that. I have a flat wall back there, and I just have no interest at all in what we probably have here right now, which is leaves out of focus behind it, or stuff back there things you can't read exactly. I like to read everything in the picture, I guess. And if it's not worth reading, out it goes.
Well, it's like peripheral vision just sort of fades out from people, and they focus straight forward, and then the rest of the world fills in as that kind of fades into the...
I like everything in the picture. It sounds so left brain of me, but I like everything in the picture to be telling a story. It can simply say that this is photography being done in the front room of my house on Esplanade, and because there's the corner of the mantelpiece. And that mantelpiece then appears in another picture as the main item, and you're seeing just an edge of it in one of the photographs. Some of the earlier photographs I did were against the backs of canvases, my painting canvases, and I thought that was keen. That showed that I was a painter, right? And then I got some bigger canvases I just hung down the wall. I've never liked the surface of paper. Maybe it's because when I was young I was made to do display windows, and there was always that wretched seamless paper to deal with every day. But I always just have real canvas. I don't care if it's dirty or fingerprints or grease on it or what. I love fabric. I would at first do these big canvases, and there was a little space on the side, and it became quite typical that my pictures would have a little lap space on the side where you caught a piece of the wall. You saw how tall were the baseboards, or a little pipe coming up, a little gas pipe going to a gas heater, sort of thing. Those little details were in the picture. I called them Velázquez details because, unless I'm mistaken, one of the coy things Velázquez did was to leave things in the picture that told that the picture was a lie, like the little prints on the horse, and then you have a little rug on the bottom, or you have the backdrop stops suddenly and you have a floor coming out. And I think that's fun to do. Maybe not in every picture. Sometimes you want to give an illusion of something, maybe. But I love to give an illusion of something exotic or perfect or marvelous, and then kind of give way and say, oh, I was just kidding. It's really my living room. I like to do that, and it's in most of my photographs. This present series that I did that looked like they were going to be very deceptive, very convincing illusions of people buried in the sand or buried in water, such as that. When you first see them, they look that. The printer thought they were very convincing. People asked me how did I do it, and you can see, if you look hard, you can see the canvas wrinkled up around the people, because I didn't bother to hide it, because I think I feel funny about being completely illusionistic. I'd rather let little what do you call it, telling the lie or something. I like to just tell that I was lying here and there. I'm not interested in being a seamless illusion. I don't know why. Maybe I'm not much for fantasy. I'm a real earth sign person, I've been told. Even when I was a child, I mean, my idea of a divine and wonderful life would be going swimming in the bayou at the corner with the man who lives down the street or something. And you know, in my drawings, all of the angels have very big feet and hoofs. You know that because you have to land. I always think I'm very earthbound. Very. The other thing that has a big play in my art, I think, is my being so cerebrally ambivalent. I'm left brain, right brain, and there are some aspects of over orderliness that some of my things are just incredibly orderly. I'll pursue real tidiness and real explicit details of certain things or structures of certain things, and then I'll bust it all up with a passionate kind of romance. So there's always the classical romantic fighting each other. I believe that that's what good art is made of, and I just have to go with that. I mean, I'm being Jericho half the time, and I'm being Aang another part of the time. I think that's why we like what we like in Michelangelo, and I think it's why we like Rembrandt and Rubens. I think because I don't think you should have to have romance and not classicism. Or I don't think you should have to give up all formality in order to have wonderful expressions of things, and vice versa. I don't think you should throw away expression in order to just make things tidy. How do you know the sound is good?
It'll be good. I'm trying to just mask out a little bit of the wind when it comes outside. And you're doing very well with the traffic when it goes by, because you kind of pause and then pick it up, so I think it'll be fine.
It's really funny when you go to do something like this, you see how much noise there is, because
there really is a tremendous amount.
Saturday morning is much quieter, and Sunday the mornings are. But
if the evening were calmer, it would be less of a problem. But at the same time, it gives you a context that I think is worthwhile. So,
yeah. Why don't you eat something? I recently, first last summer, and then again just last month, I did a set of photographs which were different from what I'm usually known for. My best work has always been, I think, and most people think so, that work, those photographs in which the photographs which you might call buttery portraits, in the sense that Manet's close-up, straight-on portraits were, where the person is focused on you. They just invite or challenge you to jump into their personality and see what they're about. Those photographs are very, very simple in composition, although hard to work out. They're usually a head and shoulders, or what is ordinarily called a bust. They're there, or else, which is much more complicated, that going all the way down to mid-thigh, because then they become both a naked picture and a portrait. If I contribute something strong to photography, that's probably it. My ability to picture the model's sexuality and their brain, or their life as told through their face at the same time. So my photographs have almost always been the fact that there is this barbative, this back at you look of the people talking back to you, that they are, what is the expression for that? That they are, the observer is observing you, is looking back at you, presenting back to you, and questioning you even as you question them. I recently departed from it, not for any particular reasons, except I wanted to make some studies similar to my drawings and paintings of people that are just torsos, just sort of like sitting nowhere or sitting in the sand or something like that. I thought I would express a sort of something that you would find more in my drawings and paintings than you usually do in my photographs. Probably just because I don't care to involve myself in all that trickery of the setup, the arrangement. But they're photographs of frustrating photographs of the vanquished, or the depossessed, or the defeated, the abandoned. And the best way of doing that to me was to not let them look back at you, because I usually, in my liberal and generous spirit, invite the person to share the camera with me even as I do with painting, and usually have them looking back at you and telling their story as much as I get to tell mine, and probably more. But in this case, I did these frustrating, I thought, pictures of my model Glenn, Troy, other people who are known for how wonderful they are looking into the camera. I did them as a piece of meat, just sitting there, being just torsos, just a behind, two of them sitting there, just behinds and torsos facing away from you, sometimes with a strap on them or something demoralizing. I think it was the war. I think it was our recent, I know it was our recent war that brought that on. And then, surprisingly and practically, something that doesn't happen all the time, those photographs became very important to that big painting I just finished about conflict, a big war painting. And that canvas incorporated a lot of what I had done already in the photographs. It, however, expanded and did things that photographs don't do for me, because I'm not going to sit there and concoct the trickery. So you have people coming at you and such that are something that I could never have done in photography, because I don't care to stage all of that. But anyway, that series is a very different series for me, because it's frustrating. It's to me very unsatisfying. The figures are sort of, most people would think they're classic, I guess, in some kind of way. I think they're very limited and frustrating, but I like them a lot, because it's just another thing for me to do with the camera. I'm not very interested in doing a lot of things with the camera. I'm not very experimentational. I don't care to see all the things the camera can do. I mostly want to do the kind of pictures I do. I'd like to do some video soon, and I want it essentially to look like my photographs. I mean, I guess I'd be pretty retarded if that's all they look like, and I didn't do anything different. But maybe I'll do some sort of thing where there is a more video. What is it called? The hot medium. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll be hot and then it'll go cold on you, and cut down to my still kind of scenes, my still kind of portraiture. Fixed kind of pictures, but maybe I'll go through some active things in order to get to it. I don't know if that can work. I'll try it.
Well, I think you'll find video a very expansive and imaginative medium.
But I'm not.
To go around and work with until you find your own eye in it.
But it's funny how I resist that. I'm very. I must say, I am not very open to influences or suggestion. I have gathered some things from, I guess, from other painters in the last 10 or 15 years, but they probably hang around for 10 years in my head before they ever find their way into my art. I'm just not much influenced by people. I'm not very interested in going to art shows. I never remember what I saw. If I go to New York and see a show, or just go see a couple of Manets, I can come home and be happy with that for 5 years. People tell me, oh, there's such and such a show is opening. I say, oh, isn't that nice for them, for someone else? It's really funny. It's awfully stodgy of me, but I seem to have what I want to talk about. I'm an artist, which I grew up thinking was what an artist is supposed to be, and that is, I live a warm, involved, humanist sort of life. There are lots of people passing through my life. I have exciting experiences and learn things about people, and they always go into my art. It is amazing. I mean, I cannot have an experience and it not get into my art. Sometimes by the next morning, sometimes the same evening. I have a friend who, he's dead now, but he was a wonderful artist, but he went into a very dry period, and he said, I just don't know what to do. And I said, well, just sit around and draw. And he said, well, I don't draw. And I said, well, of course you draw. You have wonderful looking drawings. And he said, well, those aren't drawings like you draw. And I said, what are they? And he said, well, those are pictures. Those aren't like you draw. And at the time, I hadn't clarified in my head what that difference was. And about a year after that, I realized what it amounted to was I draw from life, and he drew from art. So that if he drew, it looked like a Leger, or a Leger Picasso Miro, and they were gorgeous, but they were concoctions. And when I draw, as of the last 15 years, I don't know what it's going to look like. I mean, I'm looking at it, but I'm drawing out of some process of going from real three-dimensional life or some scenario, some story that goes through my head and it comes out in line and shade. And that's not the same as making pictures. It's not saying what the picture is supposed to look like. It's saying what the picture is supposed to tell. You know, it's very funny. It's like writing. I mean, like you don't picture what the page is going to look like or what all those words, how many adjectives you're going to have on a page, unless you're a computer. You don't think about how many adjectives you're going to have on a page when you're saying quickly what you did yesterday.
Right.
You know?
I often think of the writers who go to school to take classes in writing and how that ruins their own natural expression because it gets in the way and kind of takes their natural vigor.
But you see, people don't understand that about my work because they think that I work in some style, like the Michelangelo style or something, and it's not so at all. You know, I draw that way, and if the person has a certain kind of boxy, heavy, or muscular look, it might come out looking like Michelangelo. If the person is a dwarf, it might look, to them, not to me, but to them, it might look like Velasquez. If the person is sinewy, as lots of the black people are around here, it looks Signorelli. I know it looks Signorelli. They may not know that. Drawings and paintings, in their own time, are done by an artist who knows what people look like, and he knows what particular people look like. And it goes through him, and it becomes that art. And it is done over and over again. Now it's being done by me, and if that looks like somebody else's from then, it doesn't have anything to do with my looking like that artist. It has to do with, we were doing the same thing.
Right. In the same period when a certain style of look, a style of dress, a style of attitude might have been coming through in the people that you were looking at.
Yeah, but it's funny. I know how different my drawings are. They are, to me, they're not at all like the people that people think they're like.
Right.
You know, it's just it's Baroque or it's coming at you or something. But I know that there are no telltale things that look like that person's art. I mean, I know that my drawing a hand like this is very strange and awkward and a different kind of thing as I see them, not the way Michelangelo saw them, not the way Caravaggio saw them. Not at all. I mean, if I sit and try to do what Caravaggio did, it irritates me. It just irritates me, even if it works, because it's not the way I see things. And I see them much more chunky and bombastic, and I guess more butch. I mean, I see things that are kind of carved out of space and are jerky, sort of. Even my sinewy things will end in something boxy or something bombastic. It's very strange to influence, it's hard to influence the camera to do those things. One has to change the perspective of a leg or something to make a drawing. Say if I'm photographing someone from the top of their head to mid-thigh, to keep it from having this photographic verisimilitude of fading out at the bottom away from the lens or something, or the way it looks to us going down smaller, to make it look more like I've always seen it on paper, flattened out. I then have to have the person bring their leg forward and their arm come forward or something such as that, so as to flatten the space. So my photographs are not half so naturalistic as they look. I mean, they're not that real. They're very posed as a rule. And then I may get some startled or natural look on the face that makes you think that the person is just caught there, but they're always very posed. I don't think I've ever done a photograph that wasn't very posed. They're always posed. Sometimes the posing gets in the way, and then you just don't print that.
In this kind of dual reputation as painter and photographer, do you find them complementary or difficult to deal with in people's minds?
I find it very hard to deal with. I find it really, really very hard. Because people make assumptions that just aren't fact at all. I mean, they think I made photographs and then I learned to draw from the photographs, which is absolutely crazy. I mean, I've been drawing for 50 years or more, and painting that long almost. And they think, I don't know whether they should see the similarity between the things or not. I don't know. I think there's a very unnatural and uncomfortable interest in photography today. I mean, certainly when I started making pictures, I had absolutely no intention of becoming a famous photographer. No way. I was just making some little records of those people because I was crazy about those people. And I knew that my drawings, in their aesthetic delight and their craziness of drawing, were not records of the people. And so I wanted to record the people as well as the fact that I had expressed them in my drawings. And I thought it'd be fun to go back and look at them later. Well, it became interesting to me when people told me that I made wonderful photographs, because I couldn't imagine why photography or any art field was in such a bad shape that they would think that mine were good, you know, when I didn't know how to do any. What it amounted to is I had transposed from my drawing and painting of, at that time, 30 years or something, all that knowledge came over, and I put an overabundance of a kind of wisdom on top of the photographs. It wasn't photographic wisdom. It was art wisdom.
Or painter,
you know,
wisdom.
Yeah, it was, and there were certain classical things happening in my photographs, and even more now, that people didn't understand the camera could be made to do, because we had been through those wonderful photographs of the Farm Security Agency, and then the war and all that, the wonderful documentation that was done. And so people were astounded to see these monumental photographs, is what they seemed to be. I jammed the people up close, but still I kept it all in repose and all in focus. And so you had this monstrous person looking down your throat, telling you his story, but still always seemingly classical and composed and held in. It tremendously influenced Mapplethorpe. He was just absolutely shocked by them, because until that time, that was 79, he had never seen compositions that he didn't understand, I don't think, at first. But what it is that all came out of art history. It didn't come out of photography history. It came out of painting and drawing history, what was happening in my photographs. Because that's what I brought to photography, is I brought the knowledge of postures, of poses, of things that had been happening, that happened in the Renaissance, things that happened, I mean, not that I'm such a careful student of art history, I'm not, but I'm an observer of art history. And so I brought to photography all these classical, tried and true ideas of presentation of the person, and it had nothing at all to do with what the camera does well or what the camera does other than what I wanted it to do. It had nothing to do with all the various things the camera could do. It had only to do with, if you want to tell about a person and you want them to come across, how do you direct them, how do you frame the thing, how do you work out the negative and positive shape so that the positive shape looms at you, but the negative shape supports it. And those are just things that I've been doing in my small paintings of heads and torsos all along. I didn't do anything in my photographs that was different from what I had for 10 years or 20 years been doing in my paintings. My paintings were buttery, close-up, strong, carved-out portraits with very strong contours, sometimes naked, sometimes just heads, and the photographs just were exactly that same thing.
Well, that must have terribly startled Robert Mapplethorpe when he saw all that in a photograph.
He had always had scenario, kind of nasty scenario in mind. Mm-hmm. What kind of scenario, what kind of hanky-pank will catch people's attention? And this was at the time he had as far as I know up to that time, there was always some sort of activity that was unnerving or shocking or exciting in the pictures. Then there was a sort of a object, things happening in a room sort of look to the photographs that he showed me, and that we swapped some photographs then. And the ones I took, I was always looking for the ones that were more like mine, that were more like fill the space, contours important, shapes important, and then some presence in the person. His pictures before that were more like a slice out of a movie, an intimate movie, or something like that. The ones of him with the whip, I have one of those, one like that. The ones of boys in a room doing different activities and what. They were more like figures in a space, and mine were more like the big figure occupying the space totally and just leaving small negative spots around the thing. He loved the ones that were up close, of the deformed arms of the boy looking at you and things like that, that then had strong lighting, but the bodies were always sculptural and immediate. I guess immediate is what. Now, the immediacy that were in my pictures was always kind of sociological and what was the word for that? Appealing and solicitous. I mean, you were brought into the person's plight or the person's beauty or whatever. It was solicitous in the sense that I was saying that this person is wonderful and you're going to want to know about them, or this person is terrible but you're going to want to know about them. That immediacy for him was a wonderful way of scaring people even more. So the first ones that I may have influenced would have been those in which he had his same scary subject matter, and he made it more scary by moving them in tighter and composing more tightly, as I did. Judging by the pictures that he bought from me at first, that's what the case was, as I'm saying it, because he bought pictures that I then immediately saw the reflection of. A head that's real close and leaning over, but the eye still looking at you. Now, that was a funny thing that was, I never would have thought that art photography, as I was then becoming, that art photography didn't do the same wonderful thing that candid photography does, or paintings did, and that is capture the person by looking straight into their face, right? But art photography, seemingly before that, was always somebody going off somewhere doing these things. Don't look at the camera. Well, the only instructions I ever gave was stay looking at the camera, or you had to look at the camera, you know, and which was very strange, because my pictures had maybe the arty finish and the modeling, the shape and form making of another kind of art, but they had the straight-on look of a photograph of your little boy, or your little girl, or your wife. You know, so they had that funny look about it. Now, the first ones were mistakenly believed to look like Diane Arbus, when what they were anti-Arbus. They were so close up because all I had was a short lens, and I didn't know that. But they were very close up, and so the very first pictures were thought to be scary, like Diane Arbus, And since a lot of my friends were dwarfs or people with missing limbs or people who are handicapped in some way, because I've always known a lot of them, it was believed that my pictures were like that in that way. And it was absolutely opposite, because mine are so solicitous and the people are presented always in a you'll want to know more about this person way, whereas she did the bang shoot one, kill him and get him out of here approach to people. Diane Arbus really and truly thought all those people she photographed were just freaks. I mean, she really and truly believed that's just freaks. Susan Sontag said that to me. She said she's a middle-class Jewish woman and those are freaks to her. There's a real Walt Whitman air, I guess, to my photographs. There's less of it, maybe less of it, I don't know, maybe so. I now allow myself the luxury of sometimes composing more and making more prettified pictures without the portraiture being so strong. And that may be Mapplethorpe's influence back on me, doing that sort of thing. But I always did that in my paintings anyway. And then on the other hand, there are some people who are so wonderful to look straight in the face, I find I can't turn them away. There was a big difference in that Robert's orientation to people was so much, I'm afraid, shallower than mine. He had much less patience with people. So, I mean, whereas the people you see in my photographs, you'll see them again 10 years later. I mean, I have photographs of people over a period of, well, Troy, over 20 years. You see them again, you might see them just 6 months later or something like that, or you see them seen in a different kind of way. Whereas Robert, I don't think, had the patience to put up with people after he shot them dead once. Shot them dead? It's very funny, isn't it, that you shoot pictures.
You shoot people, and you shoot presidents, and you shoot people. And
yeah, it's a very, the camera can be very mean, very disturbing, very dispassionate, very, can be really hateful, and it can be adoring.
Well, don't you think that perhaps your romantic approach, as opposed to his slick fashion photography?
But you know, but you see, that what we get to call now his slick fashion photography, I'm not so sure that he didn't develop that off of me and Baroness Abbott and other people like that, and Penn and Avedon. But it wasn't there, I don't think, when I first met him in 78 or 9. My photographs were never slick and fashionable, but they had a rich velvety air and careful composition that sometimes they might have a false candor. I mean, the person could be coming at you like this, but I had been going through 2 rolls of trying to get the arms in the right position for that, right? So there was a mock candor to mine, as there would be in, you might say, in a Manet portrait, that you say, oh, that candor in a Manet portrait. Well, the candor took him 6 months or 6 years to get on that picture, so it ain't so goddamn candid, you know? Well, that's how my candor is too. Sometimes you work at it, you build it, you get it there, and then you blow it all in an act of love of getting the eyes right, you know? And maybe it took you 6 months to arrive at that point. Well, in my photographs, sometimes I'd keep moving the person, nudging them into position. Am I too close? Nudging them to do something, you know, to get into the picture, lunging always, and then trying to get the focus right, then put your head back a little bit high, a little lower, and I would take 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows of the very same pose, because I knew the pose was right. I just had to get it right. But anyway, Robert was doing more scenario kind of wacky, didn't I surprise you with this sort of things that weren't quite up to slick photography. I mean, not that it should have been, but his slickness, I think, developed after taking the classicism from me and some other people like me. I don't know if there were any other. Are there any other modern photographers, contemporaries, that he seems to have shared something with or taken something with? I mean, because we know how influenced he was. There are pictures of his that definitely are reminiscent of George Platt Lyons, of so and so. Certain muscle photographs that you know we all grew up on 25 years ago in cheap magazines. But he's taken all those things and given them a glorious, slick beauty.
Well, I think his was basically an American pop culture background of the physique photograph, the semi-erotic magazine photograph.
I know, but I don't know any others that. I mean, I'm trying to think. Are there any contemporaries of his that? I mean, like he knew, liked, and admired my photographs, right?
Right.
And I'm trying to think. Were there any others that were like that to him? That
where he went in and lifted.
Yeah, because it seems to me what he did with the others was he would take muscle photographs that would appear in leather magazines or some kind of magazines, and he would improve them. I mean, he would take the subject matter and the funny, wacky, sleazy style, and he would glorify the sleazy style. What's funny is that in mine, he would take what I would have called moral nudes, as what's his name? Kenneth Clark calls them moral nudes, meaning nudes that are non-sexual. They talk about other values, like Kouros, like Greek things do, like true classical art does. Well, he took those and then he made them, I guess you would say, more contemporary, but that's not so, by making them more sleazy or making them more more common somehow. I would have details in mind that would maybe say who the person was or where they were from. He would put details in perhaps that would say what act they were going to get engaged in or something, like, you know? I mean, so he would put cruel sort of details that would speak a sort of a using of that person. They're people for using. And mine would be details that say where that person came from and what he maybe is like. Maybe a tattoo would say that, or some piece of luggage under an arm or something, but not what I was going to do with them or what you might do with them, you know? So, I mean, he made pictures that appealed to the rich, conservative or fascist gay audience that he was appealing to, and he could put anything in those pictures if they looked like people you could buy or use or handle, and mine looked like people you can't buy or use or handle. So I know that his friend Sam Wagstaff was offended by the fact that I liked my models so much, and they were permanent underclass kind of people. He thought that was not right for Robert to be interested in. But it was all right for Robert to be interested in these people if they looked like they could be used by the people who were going to buy the pictures. And knowing who buys the pictures, I mean, that's what it worked. I mean, they were publicized by his whole career has been furthered, publicized, and bought by people who are usually well-heeled or wish to be well-heeled or look like they will be well-heeled. People who can buy and sell the stuff that's in them pictures. Whereas there's always that sort of look of other human beings that you have to tolerate in my pictures. I'm shamelessly humanist, and it's all over the pictures. It makes mine a little bit, a lot less sellable, and sometimes a little bit less bearable, because my pictures press you into a corner sometimes by being full of problems. social problems and political problems and such.
And Robert formalized those out and stylized them into something acceptable, I think. Whereas you leave it as it is. Romanticize it even.
I think that he bought people more than I did. I mean, I pay people a certain amount of money to pose for me. But I don't pay them enough that I'll never have to see them again, which I think is what, I mean, we discussed prices a lot, and there was, of course, the major difference that in New York, people know who you are and know what they can get out of you, and they say $500. And in New Orleans, somebody say, gee, I'd like to be in your pictures. Oh yeah, I always did want you to take a picture of me, and so then I'd pay them for taking the picture, but I'm apt to see them the next day, and the year after, and 4 years after that, and when their mama has to pay her electric bill, I have to pay the electric bill. So I pay less for as a modeling fee, but I pay more later in friendship or closeness or just our village sort of coexistence. But Robert felt very threatened by the people he photographed. He wanted them never to come back again. He would get furious. He would tell me that they would, he'd give them, you know, a photograph signed, and then they'd go off and sell it, and they'd say, oh, it rained and it went down the toilet or something, or the house burned down and I lost the picture or something. They'd come back for another one, and he was furious that they'd keep bothering him because he wanted them to just go away.
He wanted them for the moment when he was creating and then gone.
You know, I have a friend in New York who once said about an early Louis Malle picture. Remember that Lucien Lacoste? No, Lucien. No, Lucien something. Anyway, it's some town around here, the name. Lucien. It's a town in New Orleans, in Louisiana. Anyway, the actor had been discovered. He was a non-professional, the star of that movie. He was a wonderful-looking peasant boy. Louis Malle discovered him. The boy got lots of money. He bought a convertible sports car, raced it down the street, went off the road, and was killed. And my friend said, "Oh, what a wonderful way." He said he didn't have to put up with him making more movies or anything. And it's true, and I think Robert had that feeling. I want them to just exist in this picture and don't see them again. I don't want them to come hang around me, you know. There were very few of his models that he would get a crush on so much that he wanted to go on with them, I think. I mean, there were some, of course.
Well,
I'm unfortunately, I'm capable of entertaining affairs with everybody on Earth at the same time. Not successfully, but energetically.
Well, New York is in a sense a very regional kind of town. It's an island, self-contained, and here you are in New Orleans. And
you know what's funny? Yeah, you know what's funny? I often say, and people think it's just a cop-out, but I think New Orleans is about the size that Paris was when Paris was great.
When Paris was Paris.
Yeah, I mean, for creating art, for knowing your subject matter, for knowing the people you're dealing with, for reusing them and them being there when you need them, for reconsidering things, redrawing a picture and throwing it away and doing it another way. The people are there. You know the grocer. You've known him for 30 years, and you know that if you want to look at the grocery, it's going to be there again, and you can keep churning these people. I know the sons of people I photographed back in the 70s. I've drawn people in the 60s that I now draw the children of. It's a very strange thing. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but once you're into it, once you're doing that, it shapes your, especially if you're a classic sort of art creature, which I am. I live my life, and it's reflected in my art. My art tells what I've learned or failed to learn. It's very hard to give that up and say, oh, I'll just go someplace where I don't know the people and I'll see some different kinds of faces. I'm not interested in it.
Well, you have a community infrastructure here of creativity where you can go back and pick up a reference that might have been left dangling before, whereas Robert was in a Kleenex kind of use it.
I don't know whether
on it and throw it away.
I don't know whether it's insecurity on my part, but I really like for the brothers of, the fathers of, the mothers of, the wives of and the children of, to think that I'm that nice artist who drew their daddy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's really strange. And they don't have to like all the pictures. They're not, you know, but they come in sometimes, people who I've photographed or drawn, and they'll come in and they'll look and say, man, you see me better than I do, you know, or, oh, you know just how that kind of dude thinks. Well, to me, it's somehow more comforting than having a critic say that he did that well, but when I know that the critic doesn't know what it was I was doing well.
Mm-hmm. Because they're looking at the formalist.
Because they probably don't have that experience that I have. My pictures are frequently experiences shared with the models. That I know a lot about what they are, and it goes into the pictures, and only they can verify it. Not that I spend all my time getting it all to be verified, but it's comforting that things regularly get verified, and you can move along knowing that you've done a human activity which is attractive to yourself, that you're proud of.
Well, perhaps some of these critics with their art school backgrounds are like the photographers and the painters who get squeezed through the art schools and can only perceive through that squeeze.
Well, we have a good and energetic and very serious critic you met the other night, critic here in town, but I really don't expect him to know all of what I'm doing, because I mean he's the one critic, and it's kind of hard for him to like all of the things I do, and it's very hard for a critic in a place like New Orleans where they have been looking at the same person for 15 years to find something to say. So all of a sudden they become negative simply because they got tired of being positive. You know, they get tired of saying, what are they going to do every year, say they like the same thing? Mm-hmm. Instead they say they wish you'd change, and I'm not going to, you know. I hope to improve, but I don't hope to change.
A new set of critics is needed.
Change critics, not artists.
Critics, not artists.
Keep the same artists and keep changing critics. That would be good. They could shift them around from town to town.
Many towns would be very happy if that would happen.
Yeah. Well, I haven't been damned much. I've been praised a lot. I think my work is a great deal more sound than people know. I mean, because we live in this age of novelty, you know, this, I guess it's because of the gallery and sales system, because galleries cannot keep paying the rent if they don't have novelty, if they don't, everybody flush everything and have a new thing. It's the same as the fashion industry. I once did work in the fashion industry, and it's exactly the same thing. You have to convince them that, oh, this new thing is better than last year, so you have to damn last year's wonders in order to convince people that they're going to want this year's horrors. And I'm not going to change for those reasons. I mean, I know that I do the right thing for me and my talent, and I have to just pursue it and improve it.
What drew you initially to people with missing limbs?
Charcoal. I've always, since childhood, I've been more than fascinated, just drawn totally to people who are handicapped, but particularly people who are triumphant, though handicapped. I mean, I've always loved tough dwarfs, always. And I can remember Long John Silver kind of creatures, the buoyant, tough, or wild drunk on one leg. I've always thought was just the piratey kind of person was always the most fascinating to me. Well, I've explained it to myself, but it's too hard to tell in public. But I've really always been attracted to little people who act strong and big, or it's just super triumphs I like, heroes. Most of the people, that is one of the, I guess that is one of the funny things that makes people like Sam Wagstaff unattracted to my work. I mean, he kept looking at it saying how wonderful it was, but he wasn't about to buy any. He, I think, immediately after I visited him, and we saw each other a good many times, he then picked out those things which were all right for Robert to be influenced by. But
for Robert to build on.
Yeah, exactly. Because Robert loved my stuff and had already bought a good many things. And Wagstaff picked out a bunch of things from one of my shows, but then Robert just absorbed them. Wagstaff didn't buy them. Robert bought a lot of my stuff. He had about, well, I thought he had about 16 pictures because that's what he bought from me. But it turns out that that gallery that we're both in New York, the Robert Samuel, must have paid off some debt to him or something with a bunch of my photographs, because a whole wad of photographs that I never sold have gone through the auction houses, and some of them have ended up on the West Coast. That what is that gallery? Ace? No, there's some gallery in Los Angeles that Robert showed with, I think. Something Ace. It's a big gallery. It was a very, very flashy gallery apparently. But they had a bunch of my photographs that were 8x10s that I've never sold. They were just proofs that the gallery in New York had.
I think something inexplicable happened in the 70s, early 80s, and a lot of photographers' work got picked up by somebody, mixed up in some kind of shady deal, and then got spread out again.
Well, I'm sure that I know that gallery paid off people. A lot of people got my work that did not buy it as such. They were kind of like reimbursed for investment in the gallery or something like that. But it's hard to make galleries work with high overhead, and the gallery directors sometimes just turn bad. Although they may not have started off bad, they turn bad thinking that they're going to make it work for all of you, you know. Oh, it's all going to be all right, darling, just don't worry about it. We're going to pay you back eventually. And it goes down, 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 and nobody gets paid for anything. But I didn't pursue that gallery failure, although it was very crooked. In New York, Mapplethorpe did pursue it, and but I didn't. I wasn't going to be retaliatory about that.
So where do you think you're going to go in the 90s with your painting and your photography? A balance between the two, or do you have a feel for how that?
I'll always do more paintings and drawings, I think. Yeah, because, well, photography, I mean, in terms of time, photography takes so much less. I mean, still photography does. That, I mean, if I do a session, if I did 2 sessions a week that were 3 or 4 hours long, I mean, I'm just burnt out from doing it, because first of all, I don't make up a lot of stories that I want to do in photographs. I make up a lot of stories that are stories that I already know that I want to do in painting. And the thing that photographs are almost always hinged on the presence of some person. You know, even in these where I've messed around with the people and I've used them in a repertory sort of way, turned them upside down and photographed their asses instead of their faces. Even in those, it's based on a person, because will Glenn want to do that? Does he mind being used this one time, knowing that the next time I'll do a wonderful job of looking into his eyes? But anyway, it just exhausts me totally to do more than like 2 afternoons of photography, because we really work hard and intense at it.
What is your style of painting in the sense of timing? Do you find you go on great binges of painting and then there's...
I guess
painting,
sometimes I'll paint straight through for a long time, but essentially painting stops and starts. I'm painting a lot right now. And I'll get out of it for a while and do photographs and drawings for a while. Sometimes it's making a living, and I must say that big drawings are what I make the most off of, I think. Small paintings and big drawings. But also I just love drawing, and I draw every day. Now that I do all the time, and so it is the link. So line and form, as they are in my drawings, are always going to hold the whip over everything else. I mean, what I drew in the morning is somehow going to influence the way I pose somebody in the afternoon. The contour from the head down to the leg that is in a drawing is probably going to come up in a pose somewhere in my photographs or in my paintings, because drawing is, to me, always the backbone of what my head's doing.
Your studio space is quite wonderful. How long have you been here?
I've been here 5.5 years, almost 6. Before that, I lived in a wonderful house that was gigantic, but the rooms weren't as big as this. This is what we affectionately call Queen Anne front and Mary Anne behind. It looks like a wonderful French Quarter typical house, although it has the bigger balcony than all the others from the front. But when you go inside, it is relieved in a sort of Soho loft sort of way by the fact that it has always been a warehouse. It was gutted 100 and some years ago, and so I never would have gutted a house like this because they're too fragile, these little brick houses. I would never have taken 5 or 6 walls out. But since it's standing and they did it, I went ahead and kept it that way, and so I have 2 huge rooms only with some small rooms off of it, and they function wonderfully, because I learned in the other house that no matter how many rooms you have, you still need back into space. With photographs, you have to back the stuff away from you. In painting, you have to move the paintings away if you want to work on another painting. And so in this house, we just didn't put walls, we just left it. So it has the comfort of being a family kind of house with the porch and big porches wrapped around, and generous windows and comfortable furniture. But it has at the same time all of the flexibility of a little factory. So I could move my big bed and my little bed and my sofas and everything to another spot in the place if I wanted to, as I'm going to do when we change that stair, as I was wishing to do. We're going to change the orientation of the front room.
You've lived in New Orleans all of your life, and you don't travel, really.
I lived in New York once for about 9 months. I liked it while I was there, and then as soon as I got home, I thought, oh, thank God I'm home. I'm not aggressive. I might be dominating, but I want to be told that I'm the one that dominates. I don't like to knock on doors. I don't want to go tell somebody that they're supposed to love my painting. I don't want to do any of those things. If somebody invites me to go somewhere and do something, I'll do it. But I am not a traveling salesman. I cannot knock on a door. I guess I'm kind of grand in that I expect to have a place in society that's comfortable. I expect to have a certain amount of respect, and I expect to work very, very, very hard all the time and not have travel time, just be working all the time. So although I expect position and respect in my community, I work so hard for it, I don't feel bad about expecting it.
Well,
as Michelangelo said, if they knew how hard I had to work to attain my mastery, they wouldn't think it was so good.
Since we're into the second year of the 90s, the last decade of this century.
Yes, I'm the fin de siècle artist. You're right.
You're right. Exactly.
Fin de siècle, here I am.
I would like you to tie this up and kind of project for me where you find art, you, painting, photography, what's expected of you. I mean, you've just done this political show in response to the Gulf War, a wonderful piece.
I like to do things political, and I'm glad that I now am just as happy to do that as I was in the 60s. When I do something political, it usually has a broad, universal kind of aspect to it. I'm not very particular about things. I mean, like I did integrated kind of pictures all through the 60s, and I did pictures that, if you wish to see they were homosexual, yes, they were homosexual, in that there were only one sex in the pictures sometimes. But I also did pictures that had women in them too, and I did pictures that had just women in them. But I like to make statements that I guess are political or sociological. And I once said something, although most of my pictures in the house, as you know, are not that political, there's always a certain politics to them. They're my own human politics. But I was once at a lecture, and some critics and some art historian people were talking, and my friend Edward Lucy Smith said, well, now what is your favorite painting in the whole world? What would your, and they went around this group, and each came up with a painting that he thought was the most wonderful painting ever painted. And I said, from the audience, they had no more questions, and I said, may I have one question? He said, yes. And I said, well, one statement. I think this is really strange because I've never noticed it before, but every one of the paintings that you mentioned was a political painting, and we always think that, oh, painting is trivialized by bringing political interest into it. There were Guernica, Marseillaise, Liberty Leading the People, Death of Marat. I mean, every one of the pictures, I can't even think of them all. There were 8 pictures, and they were all political pictures from their time. They all, in their day, were some sort of a placard or banner. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting, that because we have all through the time when I was in school in the 40s and 50s, we thought, oh, well, political painting is trashy, you know, you're supposed to be above that ruins it. But in truth, it seems to raise the pictures above the ordinary. So I hope I paint a good political picture here and there.
Well, I think you do, because with the consciousness that's come into the 90s, taking people who are physically disadvantaged and, in a sense, glamorizing them, helping them transcend.
Well, that's always going to be in my picture. That's just my gut politics.
Right,
it's always going to guide what I paint. But
that's sort of like,
it's wonderful sometimes
become political on top of what you've just naturally done. So in a sense, a new politics has made what is not political to you.
But it's nice once in a while to peak by, and it gives you a rather young feeling to peak once in a while by really organizing all of your talents behind a big complaint. Once in a while, just a big complaint. Not that all of my pictures are in some kind of complaint, but I think just every now and then you have to make a big one.
What would be the big complaint you see on the horizon as the century clangs to an end? Well,
unfortunately, I'm that artist who is perfectly happy to keep painting the same pictures over and over again, but better, what he hopes. I'm not so sure that complaining against military police power, police state, police control and shaping of the world isn't going to be something to keep complaining about and trying to chip away at over the next few years, because I have the feeling that we have started into a controlling the way other countries do business and not using military might to keep a peaceful order. I'm afraid that we're on a tear on that now that we've discovered that where we've failed economically and where we've failed politically and morally, we can clean all of that up by using our guns and make ourselves like ourselves. Wow. And we really look like we're on that path. Somebody said recently in some analysis show, said that, oh, we Americans find it very easy somehow to turn success into moral right. So since we were successful in the Gulf, we are bound to tell ourselves that, well, you see, we were morally correct. And unfortunately, we'll do a lot of that, I think, soon. But I think, you know, my my mainstay, my main thrust always will be painting pictures of particular people or particular sets of people or particular things that happen to people, and bringing them to the fore so that they can be understood and shared.
And let that political Les Mis world go by while you continue with your visions.
Well, presenting what's good about other human beings is my particular talent. I know it is. And it's why I sell, and I sell a lot. I sell a lot of pictures. I don't sell them at New York prices, but I sell them at the top of New Orleans prices. And the people who buy my pictures buy them in spite of themselves half the time. And that really makes you feel good. You know that they bought it because they felt they really had to have one of those. Even though it was going to be a little bit unpleasant, they'd have trouble explaining it to their teenage daughter or their old mother, they still had to buy the picture. And people will say, well, I don't know why she bought it, but of course he's a wonderful artist, but I don't know why he paints those pictures either.
Wasn't there a young couple who married and had a kitchen table and 2 chairs and a Dureau?
Yeah, well, there's lots of people that, you know, that's one of the wonderful things, and I guess that would be something you'd give up if you, when you enter a vicious, it's hard to think of New York as a mainstream. I don't think it's mainstream. Main Eddy. I always think I'm the mainstream, and they're a serious Eddie down the road over there. One of the things you hate to give up is selling pictures at a not too terrible price to wonderful people who share an intelligence with you, who share your beliefs or your humanity. And they're people who are not necessarily very rich, and people who don't necessarily follow art trends. But you say something in your painting that may be similar to what they think in their philosophy or in their medical practice, or what they may be interested in their poetry or their story writing, you know. And I really like appealing to other to intellectuals other than art groups, because you never really know why people who are art junkies are buying your picture, you know, because sometimes you go to their house and there's the one Dureau, the one so-and-so, the one so-and-so, the one so-and-so.
The baseball card approach.
The baseball card approach, yeah. The full set. But I like my customers a lot, and that really makes me happy. It's a really good feeling.
I noticed you mentioned once that you enjoy clients coming to your studio to look through your work because you get a chance to...
It's exhausting sometimes. Sometimes it draws you away from your work and it keeps you from doing things. But on the other hand, I've met some of my really best friends by just being patient and letting people visit me because they wanted to see my studio and see what it is I'm up to, why is it that they like my photographs or like my paintings. And it's a kind of a proud moment to have somebody want to come and see your work and meet the people that you draw or paint. And I mean, I find it very hard to not say thank you, I'm glad you like me, when somebody really is devoted to my art.
Well, you also get a chance when they're here to kind of watch the psychology unfold as they're making their decisions between painting A and painting B.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, not that one should paint according to that, but you learn some really interesting things about your own work when you... Sometimes people pick tougher, and sometimes people make rougher and braver choices than I would make. I mean, it's the reverse of what most people would think. The people who swim the moat, so to speak, who pick up the telephone and call you and say, oh, I didn't know I could get you on the phone, you know, and oh, I would love to see your work, but I don't want to disturb you. If you have them over sometime, it's very strange. You can find out they, in some sense, have better taste than I have, because I might I might average out or normalize my work in my head, and I'll be thinking that they're going to buy down the middle or something. They're going to buy something that is not too wild and disturbing, and something that's not too sweet and gentle. They're going to buy not so. They might fool me completely. They might like the unfinished drawing that's really tough and scary, and I never would have shown it. It would never have made it. Pictures that are bought from my house are frequently pictures that never would have made it to the gallery, because I would have, or in talking to the gallery, not that my gallery doesn't have good taste, because he has, but in talking to him, we might drop it out somehow, like a marriage sort of.
The gallery edit.
Yeah, and it's not his fault. It might be my fault that I might think that it's not slick enough, pretty enough, or frameable enough. And people will come to my house, and sometimes they'll buy something that's a lot closer to my roots, a lot closer to my bloodstream than I would have shown them.
Qualitatively, there's no question. The question is, over your lifetime, can you give an estimate of the number of paintings, perhaps, the number of photographs? I know this is, absolutely any idea. I talk to some artists and they say, well, I've done 200 drawings in my life, or I've done 50 photographs, and
I do thousands and thousands of drawings, and I do little thumbnail drawings. I do drawings like storyboard for my photographs now. I didn't do that at first, but now if I know I'm photographing, say, two guys and doing them together, which isn't too frequent, I will do a bunch of drawings just so that I don't forget the ideas that I might do in the heat and the craziness of doing the thing. I'll do all kinds of little, and some of those drawings I love, and they'll later become something else. I'll do little sketches like that. Regularly I do charcoal on rag paper every day. I have a couple of easels around, and I draw faces, I draw poses of several graceful women's bodies together. I'll do some fornication scene. I'll have all these things going all the time, and I begin an immense amount of stuff and then finish it over a very slow period of time when I get another idea of what to do on it next.
Perhaps that takes us back.
I work very fast though, so there are really literally thousands and thousands of pieces around, and in the photographs, which we have them neatly filed away, because you have to do that. It's the only way. You have to have negatives put away neatly and archivally, and there are just I guess hundreds of thousands. I don't know, because if somebody's worth shooting, I usually will do 10 rolls of 12. 10 rolls of 12, so there's about 100 to 150, sometimes similar, but many exposures of anyone that I find worth photographing.
Well, we mentioned cinema earlier, and since you are finding storyboarding more and more of a procedure, and have mentioned video as a potential direction that you might go as the century ends, perhaps this is all coming together into a new dimension of Dureau.
Yeah, that storyboard thing. Storyboard is just a visual note making. Like I'm what's called, what they call it, a firstborn adult note maker. I write notes. If I'm going to get on the phone to talk to somebody, I don't want to waste their time and mine, so I'll write a whole list of things, and then I'll pick up the phone and I'll cover those subjects. Sounds hysterically boring, but that's what I do. And that's what you do in drawing, too. You make some little quickie sketches of what you're going to do. And I'm pretty symbolic in those things. I draw real fast. It's real easy for me to draw to a certain satisfaction. The finishing of something that makes it elegant, poetic, and wonderful to look at, that's something else. But I draw well and fast. So why not draw all the time? Because it's something that you do nothing but better the more you do it. Better.
Always. If you had to summarize your own feeling about your career at this point, I think you may have said it in that line, but...
Well, it's funny. I would have thought, when I was in college, and right out of college, I would have thought that my art was going to be this exquisite, somewhat austere, magnificent other stuff out there. And what's happened is, although it's big and baroque and dramatic, even operatic, some of my painting, it is, to me, just exactly like my life. It's like an extension of my life. And I mean, I don't know if anybody told me that that's what I was supposed to do, that I was supposed to live a life and reflect it in my art. But I think the paintings are a lot like I act and like I live. Although I live a conservative life in terms of its safety. I mean, I don't do drugs and lie around the street and all, which I may have come close to in the 60s. But I'm pretty self-preserving and careful about how I live and what trouble I don't get into. But there is a warmth and a lot of passion and a lot of dinners, a lot of dinners and a lot of candles in my life, and I think it's in the art. And I guess when we get to the end of this century, I'm going to be able to look at all these pictures, and I always know exactly what was going on when I look at a picture. It's not like looking at some abstraction, if that were what I did. I mean, I look at the pictures and I know all those people, and I'll say, oh, well, that's Troy, but oh, I used so-and-so's hand. Oh, that's my hand. I put my own hand in there. So everything in the art is stuff chopped out of and reused in my paintings, taken from my life and put into paint. And some things that I paint in my pictures, I then go ahead and live them out too. Some stuff starts in my drawings, and then I make them come true. I did drawings in the 40s or rather in the 50s, that I then made come true in the 60s, and things that I drew in the 60s I know happened in the 70s. That's a funny idea, but I know it's true. I guess it's the same brain is thinking, the same two brains are thinking all the time, both in the way I live my life and the way I make my art.
So then, to young artists, you might say, live.
I don't know how they do it today. I mean, it looks so dangerous.
I know.
I'm glad I lived in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
You know, in the prohibitive 90s, there's nothing you
I don't know
do.
how I made it through the 40s and 50s. I mean, that's really... And I really miss the 60s, although I don't go around acting a lot like a 60s person, probably, but I really miss all the commitment and I miss the nerve endings hanging out of the 60s, and that's why I was saying it's fun once in a while to more than fun. It's great and invigorating to once in a while get really mad at something and paint and put all your talents together and paint a picture, or draw it in drawings too, of things that you are really mad at or really concerned about. I think it's wonderful to work with a great deal of concern.
I know you work with concern. Are you frustrated with concern sometimes? Do you throw pots?
I used to
pre-Columbian pots?
No, I fall over them. No.
Have you?
The only time I really get mad anymore, if I get angry now, it's because I can't do all the things I want to do. There just isn't enough time in the day, and I have too many careers going on, it seems like sometimes, and that gets me mad. I used to get drunk and frustrated back in the 60s and the 50s, but I don't do that anymore. I'm very controlled about eating and drinking. But
how old are you now?
I'm past 59. I'm 60 now.
You're 60 now. Do you find you're growing backwards in time and your energy? Your energy level seems extraordinarily high.
I'm getting a lot cuter.
That helps.
I'm in good shape. I'm very healthy, but it takes a certain amount of taking care of oneself.
So that self-destructive artist syndrome is not part of your profile.
I outlived that. That's funny. I turned the Scott Welsh French and German in the right direction, whereas it started off being drunk all the time. I just turned it around and decided to get mean in my own behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very well controlled, and I just wish the rest of the world weren't so boring out there.
It's the decade, it's the end of the century.
Don't you think we've said everything?
I think so.
Thank you, it was wonderful.
Thank you, it was wonderful.